book lovers unite. I'm Demethius Jackson, and you're listening to the Chapter 1 podcast. The greatest stories ever written all begin with Chapter 1. In each episode, our guest authors will share their first chapters with you. Hey, everybody. So today we're going to be doing something different. Each episode, we feature amazing authors in their books. But a lot of folks don't realize that I, too, am an author. And on today's episode, I would like to share with you my stories. The Realmsic Conquest is a project that I've been working on for years. In summary, these books are about the world's only magical kingdom and their quest for peace. Which, you'd have to think, if you're the only place in the world that can perform magic, people either want your magic for themselves or they want to be as far away from your magic as possible, because you scare them. And while I've been producing the podcast, I've also been quietly finishing the third book, which I never thought there would be a third book, but here we are. As a result, I'm going to be republishing the previous books as the Realmsic Conquest Trilogy, starting on April 2nd with the release of Book 1. This has been a very long journey and an incredible journey because in the beginning, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and it was a struggle because in addition to being ignorant of the literary industry, people couldn't pronounce my name, Demethius Jackson, nor could they pronounce the name of my book, The Realmsic Conquest. Talk about self-sabotage. But as I always say, you gotta play the cards you were dealt, and over the years, I figured it out. And on today's episode, I want to share with you the story of how I basically went from stumbling my way to becoming not only an award-winning author, but most recently a best-selling author, since Realmsic, which is still in pre-sale by the way, has already made it to the Amazon Top 100 bestsellers for several fantasy categories. So I'm both excited and a little anxious to share that with you because it's so hard for me to talk about my own projects. I'm literally in a booth right now with the lights off and my eyes closed, just talking into a microphone. But before we get into all of that, we always start the show with a reading, and today is no exception. So today I'll be reading Chapter 1 of Book 1 entitled The Hero of Legend of the Realmsic Conquest Trilogy. In summary, when a young, inexperienced king loses his kingdom to a merciless warlord, he seeks a hero of legend, but instead uncovers a magical secret that could destroy the kingdom. The realm is the world's only magical kingdom and has never known peace. An endless war has raged between its two people, magicals and laymen, which are non-magicals. Laymans have now rallied behind the Warlord Damien, the son of the realm's greatest enemy. Promising safety from magic and riches beyond imagination, he amasses an unstoppable legion of warriors and charges towards the Realmsic kingdom. Facing imminent destruction, the realm's throne is abandoned. When all others refuse to call, Mabus, a fledgling councilman, is reluctantly catapulted into leadership. As the newest king, he faces the warlord Damien and is defeated. Now in exile in his own home, Mabus, with the help of friends, must reclaim the kingdom by locating the hero of legend who is destined to save the realm. But soon he discovers why the kingdom may never be saved. There you have it. The Hero of Legend, Book 1 of the Realmsic Conquest Trilogy, starts right now. Chapter 1. Rain poured from the sky like a flood of emotion, as water washed the overhanging balcony where King Mabus stood. Reflecting upon his situation, his heart pounded as tumultuously as the thunder echoing in the distance. Several hundred feet below him, the currents of the Northwest River battered the rock ledge that supported the Realmsic castle. The violent waters mirrored Mabus' soul. He dreaded what was soon to come, yet he was determined to ensure that the falling rain would not mirror the tears of his people. Sighing heavily, he surveyed the horizon of the only magical kingdom in existence. This was his land, the realm. There was such beauty on its surface, but such tragedy within its heart. A crack of thunder again boomed from the heavens. From the corner of his eye, Mabus thought he saw a flicker of lightning. The dark clouds had gathered quickly on this day, yet weather had nothing to do with the impending storm that now worried him. Like the volatile atmosphere above him, The realm's natural condition had been an unyielding state of war for thousands of years. The discovery of magic initially divided the Realmsic people, and now it was magic that would decide its fate. Mavis's mind flew to the seemingly simple object that held the realm enthralled and compelled enemies to attack. The Realmsic crystal was the source of all magic, the prize that maintained and threatened the realm's very existence. Secretly, he loathed it, yet duty obliged him to protect its power at all cost. Magic, came a voice behind him as though the speaker had read his thoughts. It's both our blessing and our curse. He turned swiftly to discover a dark-hooded man standing just a few feet from him. Did I interrupt you, brother? The man removed his hood, revealing a tempered smile. Never, Mavis laughed, relieved to see Grand Wizard Kilm. But I didn't hear you come in. Kilm was not only advisor to the kingdom, he was Mavis's lifelong and trusted friend. Sometimes he wished they really were brothers. The two men clasped hands. The wizard sauntered past him and leaned forward against the balcony. He stared through the rain. How appropriate, Kilm said. A storm is actually coming. Unfortunately, the storm which you're referring to is already here. Mavis joined him and pointed in the direction of the distant western nations. War is upon us, Kilm chuckled. When is it not? For 2,000 years, our history has been an endless string of conflicts and conquerors. True, but not like this. Not like him. Kilm's silence was evidence of his anxiety. Mavis knew that he shared his unspoken fear that their defeat was inevitable. Never in history had the kingdom fallen, yet never had there been an enemy such as Damien. The wizard's gaze intensified upon Mavis, as though he could see through his friend's worn features into his soul. Does he worry you? He asked. Mavis shook his head. It's not the man who worries me, he replied. It's the fervor in his voice. It's the intensity of his influence. What seemed like, overnight, one man spawned a legion of warriors. With them, he now unleashes merciless destruction. Where previous conquerors have demonstrated haste, this man is poised. His tactics, while seemingly erratic, are calculated, intricate, and unsympathetic. Our Realmsic army is sharpened by centuries of physical combat, but it isn't men they now fight against. It's ideology. Yes, Kilm said sharply, but at the basis of all ideology, there exists one fatal flaw, man's own desire to be more than he is. The Warlord's tactics are different, I agree, but his motives are the same as those who came before him. Beyond his pretty words and promises is nothing more than common greed. Mavis walked from the balcony into his chamber, his brow furrowed in contemplation. He'd only recently become king, and still found the royal chamber to be uncomfortable. The decor, passed down from generations, felt foreign to him. The overcast skies did little to illuminate the dim interior. Aside from a single candle flame flickering against the cold draft, the room was blanketed in shadowy darkness. Mavis sighed yet again. To his people, this man's greatness is indelible. It's with that passion that they fight. Kilm stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the drab grayness of the world outside. Mavis continued. It would be wise for us to acknowledge the unity they've created. Think of it, Kilm. Thousands of individually focused minds, all in one harmonious agreement to kill us. Kilm laughed uneasily. I would usually consider the union of minds a beautiful notion if it didn't mean our own demise. The king smiled half-heartedly before lapsing into silence. Mavis, Kilm began, his dark eyes filled with concern. An attack upon the kingdom is imminent. Swords and magic will not be enough to face the sheer numbers that Damien will bring with him. How are we to defend our home when this man comes? I have a plan, but I need to speak with the council. Kilm pointed to the door. The council is already waiting for you. All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that reading. So, how did this all begin? Kind of by accident. This goes all the way back to 1997, back when I was a junior in high school. At the time, we were learning English literature, and I fell in love with the rhyming epic adventures. Beowulf, Canterbury Tales. I had never read anything like that before in my life. And up until that point, I always assumed rhyme was, either for songs or poetry or for children's books like Dr. Seuss. So, of course, I had to write one myself. It was handwritten, no more than 10 pages long, and it was about the world's only magical kingdom and their quest for peace. I wrote an extra copy and gave it to my best friend Lisa, and that was pretty much it. Didn't think about that book for another 10 years. Fast forward to around 2007. I'm 26, 27 years old now, and I'm digging through some boxes at my mom's house, and what do I find? Oh, this old rhyming story I wrote in high school. I read through it, and it was pretty bad, but there was room for improvement. So I spent the next 2 years revising it. Around that time, Amazon had acquired CreateSpace, and self-publishing was becoming more popular. So I did some research, I learned how to format the manuscript for print, and then I uploaded it to CreateSpace. A little while later in 2010, I have a physical copy in my hand of the Realmsic Conquest, The Candle of Crest, my high school story, now a book. It was 100 pages and written completely in rhyme, the entire story. And I guess technically at that point, I was an author, although I definitely didn't feel like an author at the time. To help promote the book, I signed up for a blog tour, which is basically a virtual book tour. They sent the book out to a wide number of bloggers, and I also did some guest articles and got a few reviews, and I did that for a couple of months. I also created a Facebook page, and maybe even MySpace at the time, I don't remember. And I also set up a web page and an email address, in addition to social. Anyway, after that, that was it. I didn't even think about Realmsic for at least another year. And then one day, I happened to be looking on Facebook. I glanced at the Realmsic page I created the year before, and what the hell? I got 500 followers. Where did these people come from? Which I know 500 isn't a lot, but at the time it was, especially for something that I had kind of forgotten about. So that prompted me to start digging. I went to the website, I looked at the email, and people had actually written me. Not a lot, but a few. And the funny thing was, from the messages I received, people either loved the book, it was the best thing ever, or they absolutely hated it. It was one or the other. There was like nothing in between. So I started thinking, well, man, if Realmsic is inciting, such extreme emotions out of people, maybe I'm onto something. But I did not want to write another rhyming book. The last book took so long to write, especially because I was working full-time and was trying to figure out how to be a grown-up. What if I converted into a novel? Yeah, that's a good idea. How hard can it be? So I got to work and started writing Realmsic Conquest, the novel. From 2011 to 2013, I wrote this book. Also during that time, my mother passed away and I went through a divorce. I also moved from Washington, D.C. to Dallas, Texas. A lot of times, writing was the only thing that kept it together for me. But I got it done. The book was 175,000 words. And that was after getting it edited. That also should have been my first indication that something was wrong, because 175,000 words is hella long, unless your fantasy book is Lord of the Rings. But I put it out there. Same way I did before, I used CreateSpace. And the book fell flat. The reviews weren't bad, but they weren't good either. They were just meh. And that hurt more than anything else. That hurt more than a bad review, because I had poured my heart and soul into this book, and I didn't understand why it wasn't hitting, because I thought it was great. So I spoke to a friend and mentor who was also a professional literary publicist. And I asked her, what's the problem with this book? She came back with some encouraging feedback. She said it wasn't a bad book. It wasn't even poorly written. It just needed to be edited. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I had the book professionally edited. What do you mean? And she said, well, what type of editing did you get? And I said, Editing. What type of other editing is there? And she's like, oh, silly, man. There are 3 different types of editing. You got developmental editing, which is basically story building and fixing any plot holes. There's also copy editing and proofreading, which is basically catching typos and any other type of formatting issues. Yeah, she said my book needed all 3 of those. Another thing was she mentioned that my book cover was kind of confusing, because I had big dreams for this book. It was going to be a animated series. So I had someone design character concepts, and I put one of them on the cover of the book, Mavis, the main character. I didn't realize it at the time, but Mavis kinda looked like Jesus. And people were getting confused because the title was The Hero of Legend and you got Jesus on the cover. They thought it was a religious book, but it was a fantasy fiction book. So, after my bruised ego healed up a little bit, I took those lessons to heart. I redesigned the book cover to something that was more genre appropriate. How did I know what was more genre appropriate? I went on Amazon and looked at other fantasy books. I looked at how their books were designed and did something similar. Not wanting to make a mistake again by putting a confusing character on the cover, I just went with the Realmsic logo, followed by like a scenic background. Yeah, that looks fantasy, with some sparkles on it. There we go. As for the book itself, my mentor sent me to a pretty fantastic book editor, who then systematically ripped my book apart. Oh, it was painful. I felt like the dumbest dude on earth. I was like, why am I even writing? But I couldn't argue with any of the revisions. It took at least 6 months to make all those corrections. Upon completion, the book dropped from 175,000 words to a little over 80,000 words. That was basically just like half the book. All those extra words I was using, basically unnecessary. With all those words gone, the book was more streamlined and just more breathable. Plus, having to do those rewrites myself, I learned a tremendous amount about writing, specifically writing for my fantasy genre, because fantasy style is going to be a little different than sci-fi, which is going to be a little different than romance, which is going to be a little different from nonfiction. So in 2014, I republished the Realmsic Conquest Hero of Legend 2nd edition. And I saw an immediate difference. This time around, most of the reviews, if not all of them, were positive. 4 and 5-star reviews. Can't ask for anything better than that. Then I also started dabbling with social media and doing some things differently. I joined some writing communities, some reader communities, and basically tried to drum up some visibility for the book. Of those, Goodreads and later Wattpad were instrumental for me. Those 2 sites, specifically, being able to connect with the readers, I feel like not only did it boost my confidence, but it also kind of gave me legitimacy as an author. It was the first time I was speaking with other authors and addressing each other as colleagues, because we were all in it together just trying to figure out this growing digital literary industry. Plus, both of those book communities were just extremely huge. In 2015, a year after the republishing, Realmsic won its first award through Wattpad. There were thousands and thousands of submissions across the entire world, and Realmsic was one of the few winners in fantasy, and I think the only fantasy winner in the state of Texas. Man, let me tell you, it felt good. At first, I thought it was a mistake, like maybe they had emailed me by accident, but it was real, and I think it was the first real proof I had that I was a good writer. So from there, I got more involved in the writing community in Dallas. I started the Chapter 1 podcast in April of 2016. I published the 2nd book, The Icon of Earth, which also got a lot of good reviews. And as far as I was concerned, Realmsic was done. I was happy with 2 books. I felt like the story itself had wrapped up nicely and had basically kind of completed the story I had in my head going all the way back from high school. But I noticed something. I had 2 novels out there, but they weren't generating a lot of income. My online sales were marginal at best, and whenever I sold books at Comic-Cons or book fairs, most of the time I would just break even or make just enough profit to basically buy my booth again the following year. Even though I was now an award-winning author and Realmsic had a pretty decent-sized following, there were 2 things going against me: visibility and my backlist. At the time I was publishing my books, independent publishing was at its height, and I just couldn't cut through the noise. And the other thing was only having 2 novels, I just wasn't making a splash. Unfortunately, because of so much competition right now with traditional publishers and independent publishers, 2 books is not going to be enough to generate an income. In fact, there's a very popular Facebook group called 20 Books to 50K because they're saying it's going to take at least 20 books to generate $50,000 worth of revenue. These are the numbers. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rules, and it really does depend on the type of writer you are and the genre you're writing in. So after talking to an author friend of mine who had seen success with his books, and then after speaking to one of my hardcore readers who was like, how can you not write a 3rd book? In 2018, I was convinced to write a 3rd Realmsic book, The Essence of Ether, the final Realmsic book. The writing process itself was as smooth as it had ever been, because at that point, I knew what I was doing. But unfortunately, between 2016 and 2018, it had been such a huge gap in between books that Realmsic had basically floated to the absolute bottom of Amazon and the other retailers. So I was stuck with the question of, do I try to revitalize these books on the retailers, or do I just republish them? And after speaking with some industry experts I met through the podcast, I was encouraged to republish the previous books, along with the 3rd one, as a trilogy. I also became an avid listener to the Sell More Books podcast with Jim Kukral and Brian Cohen, the Self-Publishing Show with Mark Dawson, and of course, the wonderful Joanna Penn of The Creative Pen with the double N. Through those 3 resources alone, I learned about Facebook ads, Amazon marketing ads, how to identify the correct keywords for your book, how to identify what category you should compete in, even how to format your book summary. Because the first thing potential readers do when they access your book page is they look at the book cover and then they read your blurb. And you gotta grab them. Otherwise, they will not click the buy button. But to get them to your page, you gotta make sure you tag your books with the right keywords so that they can see you in the first place. So, to make this long story short, I revised the books again. I updated the book covers. I rewrote the book summaries. I identified the keywords and categories that were appropriate for the books, and then I started creating dynamic content to post on social media to increase engagement. Oh, and by the time I finished writing the 3rd book in 2019, I also reached out to the listeners on my Chapter 1 podcast email list to let them know that the books were being republished and were available for pre-order. And then just last week, I logged on to Amazon to tweak some of the keywords I've been using in my advertisements, and I noticed for the first time that for several Amazon categories, the Realmsic Conquest Hero of Legend Book 1 was already within their top 50 bestsellers list. Man, that blew my mind. I was shocked for the entire day. And I was asking my writing buddy, I was like, am I a bestseller? And he's like, yeah, you are. Congratulations. And there you have it. The entire journey from 1997 to 2019. But the story's not over yet, because there is still so much more to learn. There's room for so much more improvement, and there's so many more people to connect with. And of course, there are many more stories to write, especially now that we're moving into an industry where audiobooks are becoming prevalent, along with voice command, machine learning, and AI. So that's definitely an incentive for all of us to keep growing. And it's exciting because I have no idea what's next for Realmsic. But I do know this: when it's all said and done, it's going to make one hell of a story. And with that, we're going to wrap up another episode. Thank you all for listening to me and sharing this journey with me today. To learn more about the Realmsic books, check out the website at realmsic.com. That's REALMIC.com. The books are available right now for pre-order. Book 1 releases on April 2nd, 2019. Book 2 publishes the following month. Book 3 publishes the month after that. Rapid release. Also search for Realmsic on Facebook and Instagram, or connect with me, Demethius, on Twitter. And yes, I'm still on Goodreads and Wattpad as well. If you have any questions or comments, connect with us on social media or send an email to info@ch1podcast.com. Check out our website at ch1podcast.com, where there you can listen to previous episodes and hopefully find your next favorite author. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Overcast, anywhere podcasts can be downloaded. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, but most importantly, tell everyone you know about the show, because that is how we grow. Okay, thank you all once again. You all stay awesome. Till next time.